for the Agile community. www.Agile.FM.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Agile.FM, the first one of 2019, and I'm recording today on the 9th of January with a author of many books, but the focus today is about one particular book. That is Bossa Nova, like the dance, and that is with Jutta Eckstein, one of the authors of this book. Welcome to the first podcast of 2019.
It's my great pleasure to be here. Thank you, Jochen, for inviting me.
Of course, Jutta, you have written a book, and I'm just going to spell it out because it's called Bossa Nova, but there's actually a little bit of a longer title to it, just to explain Bossa, and that is company-wide agility with beyond budgeting, open space, sociocracy, and then I like the subtitle underneath that, Survive and Thrive on Disruption. That is the book that was written or published in 2018. So it's last year. And
that's true. It's still brand new.
It's still new, right, in the world. And I just want to talk a little bit about this book and obviously other things as well. There's a lot going on in that title of the book. Several things you have bundled together. Why did you select these topics for the title? I mean, yes, it translates somewhere to Bossa, and Bossa Nova, as I have researched, means new trend, new wave.
Very good. Your Portuguese is brilliant. Yes.
That's pretty much all there is.
well, one answer I often give is kind of, we try to pack as many buzzwords as possible in the title. And that's why we ended up with those 4 things, which isn't really serious, of course. Actually, we were looking at what does company-wide agility really mean? And well, maybe the perhaps not so happy answer is that Agile is not enough for company-wide agility. So it's not enough to use, for example, Scrum and apply it on the organization. And I know I've seen companies doing that. So you will then find the board of directors that they appoint a Scrum Master, or they run their meetings with a backlog and stand-up meetings and so on. And this might make their meetings better, but it doesn't make the company any more agile. Mm-hmm. So what we were looking at was like, what kind of perspectives need to be taken in order to have a holistic view on the company. And there is definitely like the one thing, if you look for the B of the Bossa Nova, the beyond budgeting, mm-hmm. the financial but also HR perspective, or you could also say the more strategic perspective. If you talk to people from that field, they would all let you know, as long as you fix your budgets annually, there's just no way of getting agile with mm-hmm. your company. Mm-hmm. And I think this is really true. And yet it is a different perspective than the one that Agile has. Well, probably almost everyone in Agile says as well, yeah, it's a bad idea to fix the budget annually, but we don't have an answer from the Agile community there. Mm-hmm. But beyond budgeting does, right? So they look at this side of the company and are offering different mm-hmm. ways. Then open space is more something that looks, well, I would say almost like the passion side, or the people, or the innovative power of the people. And one example is very often what we do in companies, we come up with the job description, then we look for a person fitting that job description, and well, if it's a good fit, we employ that person, instead of looking what is the full potential of the person and work with that. So mm-hmm. not using a job description as a box where we put the people in, but more also thinking outside the box with what could the different people offer or bring to our company. And this is more the invitational perspective that mm-hmm. open space provides. And maybe give you an example here.
Yeah,
WL Gore, for example, works like that anyone, any employee is invited to come up with a new product, a new feature at any time. And like in open space, if there are people who think this is a brilliant idea and I join that person in working on it, then it's a go. But if nobody is interested in it, then maybe it's not such a good idea.
Yeah, that's a good example. Thank you.
Yeah, so bringing open space more to the organizational level, and which is really, again, using the innovative power of like everyone in the company.
Right.
Then we have the S of sociocracy, and there we are looking more at like decision making or also structural aspects of the company. And if you talk with people from sociocracy, they would all say, well, as long as you come up with your decisions centrally, and as long as you have the power structure not decentralized, you will not be able to become agile as a company because you are too slow just in decision making.
Right.
Right? And so they provide answers there with like how to build in feedback in the structure in the hierarchy of the organization, and how to empower people that they can make the decisions where they are, and you don't have to wait till decision making process is running up and down the hierarchy.
Right, and that's what I like about the subtitle so much about the survive and thrive on disruption, because business is disrupted at this point, right? It's been a trend in recent years, but there's really no end in sight of disruption. As a matter of fact, the disruption is going faster and faster and more frequent.
Yeah,
So,
right. Yeah. Very good that you're pointing this out because, well, of course, we can talk about company-wide agility or business agility and all of that stuff just because we think it's a cool idea. But, well, just having a cool idea is not really the thing. The thing is you want to have it because you need it. And you need it because of those disruptions going on and because of the VUCA world we are living in.
You made a joke a little bit about the buzzwords of bossa nova, right? But I do want to go back to that because there is another B that could have been used, and you're using the word company-wide agility quite a bit. Why not business agility for this one? What's the difference, and why did you purposely not call it business agility? How do these two things, maybe for the listeners out there, because business agility is a word that's floating around, company-wide agility as well, how do these two things intersect? Maybe not, but from your perspective.
Well, I think they do intersect. We just felt business agility still doesn't look at the whole company. And so like HR or any support structures or how the board is operating or what about the bylaws of the company. And there is just so much more than just the business perspective of the company. And yes, it is an important part because typically this is the value creation perspective or the kind of the core of the company. But we really wanted to be sure that we provide a absolute holistic view on the whole company. And that's why we chose that term. And on the other hand, we also had the discussions and maybe even still that perhaps it would have been better to write the wave of business agility because it's the thing people talk about right now a lot. Yet we just felt it's too narrow for what we really want to address.
Yeah, all right. So you wrote the book, we're talking about Bossa Nova, but there's also a co-author, I just want to make sure we're mentioning him too,
Yes.
it's John Buck, right? And so he was part of that too. He also has written books, I think more on the sociocracy part in the past as well. It's actually an interesting thing about the holistic kind of thing. There are some comments on the book page, for example, and people order that. It's like there was a a common flaw some people could see around, like if somebody who is in charge of establishing company-wide agility, that they often see that from one perspective, and that's obviously not enough. And what if an organization goes through this and they have a person and that person has a narrow-minded perspective based on their experience, maybe in the industry or in that company? What is the flaw in doing this, and how would you set up an initial company-wide agility program to get all these perspectives in? How would that look like?
Well, of course, this is a question that is asking for a consultant's answer, which is, it depends.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry to say that, but this is the real answer. But still, I try to answer it. Well, when we were developing Bossa Nova, so the one thing was we came at that point where we felt, well, probably now it's about time to tell what to do, really. So after everyone understands what are the principles, the values, what are drivers, and what's important and so on, but then there's the question, okay, now what? And the thing about the now what is, well, everyone wants to have a recipe, and of course there is none, especially not in that role of VUCA and the disruptions, and so it is the depends thing. Yet still, what we came up with is that in this world, actually, there's only one thing you can do, which is continuously probing. And probing, what we mean with that is you look at the context you are in, what are the problems you are having. You maybe look at the probes we are offering in the book. We have 23 probes in there. Then you run that probe and you look at what is your situation right now. Now, looking at a probe, what it is basically it comes with a background definition and a hypothesis, what you might think you want to get or where you want to be if you make that kind of change. And then with pre-measures, an experiment, post-measures. And one of my favorite examples, it's always good to have examples, is a probe which we call Is Trust Cheaper? And it deals with the thing that we see a lot in companies, that employees are, let's say, annoyed very often about the process that's in place for getting reimbursed for travel expenses. Right. Good so one. Very often those processes are really way too complicated, and it takes forever. And then if you don't do this, then probably you will not get reimbursed and blah, blah, blah. And so of course, we also understand why those processes are in place, because it's always the fear of abuse, and that if they are not in place, then people will spend all the money, which is actually a kind of a funny attitude, because on the other hand, we trust those people to be responsible for $1 million projects.
Right.
But then we don't trust them to book a hotel, really. It's kind of...
That's a good point.
Yeah. But anyway. So the hypothesis is, which is kind of the title of the probe, maybe trust is cheaper. Maybe if we trust the people that they are sensible in the way they're dealing with travel expenses, maybe we save more money because we don't have those processes in place which we have to ensure people adhere to, and people need to, we have other people who control, and all of that. And also the frustration level goes down, so people are more motivated as well because those procedures are not in place.
Right.
And so you can run or define a pre-measure and post-measure, for example, about frustration levels with travel expense procedures, and then in between run your experiment. And we know from some companies, like really a kind of befriended company of mine, so they have just 3 rules in place, so which could be an experiment you run. So they have these 3 rules, and the one says, well, if you have expenditures on your travels, it has to be legal. Well, that's fine, right? I
Yeah.
guess that's an obvious thing. The next thing is it should be sensible. So whatever your expenses are, they should be sensible, and they are not defining what they mean with it, which is an interesting point. It's again a trust thing. And the third thing is you should take care of yourself, which also could mean anything. For me, it would mean not taking too many connections if I can also reach it like without a connection,
Right.
right? To get to the place. So things like that. And they are running everything this way, and it works fine for them. So no other rules and principles in place or procedures. Another company we know of, they actually put it down to only one rule, and it's not only about travel expenses, it's also about anything people are buying. If it's a new laptop or any infrastructure thing, whatever it is. So the only rule is you have to state on the intranet what you're buying or where you're spending the money to and how much you spend there. And that's so there's no other rule. That's the
Yeah.
only.
It's awesome. I have an experience like this very similar, right? You see an empowerment, even on a booking a hotel, right? If people are empowered to do it changes the attitude entirely, right?
Yeah.
Even though it's kind of a funny situation,
Yes.
with the example you just gave about a multi-million-dollar project we're on, and the company trusts us on that. And then I also have an example where a company had like really a receptionist empowered to order food. And it didn't matter what kind of food it was. That person had a credit card and put this food on it and no questions asked. And
Yes. Right.
so very interesting how the attitude changed. And what was the most important thing when I looked at these procedures in place was nobody abused the system. It was very interesting, right? Just like common sense. I mean, you hire these people into your organization, and it's like they're your family. Why would they? Why would they abuse the system, right? And they make
Yeah, that's
yeah,
true.
they make good decisions at that point, right? So
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, I would even say, even if there are people who are abusing it, there are also people who are abusing the system with the procedures in place. And still, probably trust is cheaper because people are much more motivated and not so frustrated
yeah,
because they have that signal that they are trustworthy.
if you can't see your family because you're making too many connections coming home from
Yeah.
a business trip, right? Negative
Right.
impact on the
Yeah.
morale. I mean, it's like
Yeah.
awesome examples. Jutta Eckstein is here with me talking about Bossa Nova, the latest book on the bookshelf from Utah. And a lot of people know Jutta from past board membership on the Agile Alliance. You wrote several books, many in English and translated into German. You're a coach, you're doing training. You had given a talk a few years ago in New York. You will be giving a talk in May in Munich. I'm looking forward to that at agilemunich.com. People can check out the program, the rest of the program. And that talk in New York I'm referring to is, I remember that because you were talking about the second page of the Agile Manifesto. Yeah, and it was an interesting talk because it was really going after the mindset of agility, right, rather than the mechanics. And that is an important thing for you, right?
That's true.
Getting into the agile mindset. Now, how does the agile mindset, the thinking, and basically the value, the principles behind agility impact Bossa Nova?
Oh, very much so. Well, there's also a reason why we call it company-wide agility and not company-wide sociocracy or something. Well, of course, one reason is also because it's my background, and I'm so agility is kind of is where I'm coming from. But it's also because especially the manifesto provides, I think, really a way of thinking also for company-wide agility. And so what we did, we looked at the manifesto in this case actually at the first page. So at the values, not the principles. And we were looking at the values in that way. What do those mean for company-wide agility? And without now coming up or defining yet another manifesto, but really kind of translating the meaning of it. And some are really straightforward, like at least I think so, individuals' interactions over processes and tools, I think really speaks about self-organization. So this is a value, a company that says we are implementing Agile on the company level has to adhere to that value of self-organization. Then the working software over comprehensive documentation, this is maybe the thing that's not so easy to understand, but the thing is the value actually says we really trust in the working software because documentation doesn't really make the status transparent. It doesn't really tell us where we are because in the document we can write up everything, but the running software, the working software is the thing that really tells the truth.
That's right.
So it actually talks about transparency. So that's that value translated to company-wide agility.
Right.
And then we have customer collaboration over contract negotiation, which is very straightforward. It just looks for constant customer focus, meaning everything should be aligned to what value do we provide to the customer. And everyone should know in the company how it relates to helping creating that value for the customer. And then we have welcome change over following a plan,
Right.
which is actually about continuous learning. Because we get that feedback and then we change the plan. So that's the welcome change kind of thing. And so continuous learning is the fourth core value. So we still use the manifesto, but we provide a translation for what does that mean on the company level, and take that as a guidance. And then we looked at, okay, what do those different perspectives, now those streams like beyond budgeting, open space, or Circle C and Agile provide for those values? How do they help to implement that?
Yeah. I just want to tell these listeners just listening to the Agile Manifesto, the value statements, we had no pre-call about this. I had not mentioned this to you, and how many out there could just state those four statements, just on the fly. Jutta, amazing.
Well,
yeah, well,
I take them serious, and I think that this is such a great work, what they provided there. And, well, I know people are talking about, well, it's outdated or something. I think it's not. It still has that value, really.
Oh, it's definitely deep. And I do want to go a little bit in the learning aspect as well, right? I'm a big fan of open space myself. We're doing a lot of open spaces within organizations, sometimes in teams. Sometimes we use it for release planning, etc., right? Great concept, but I'm just curious why open space, for example, was called out in the BOSA piece. Why not something like Lean Coffee or other structures that are available out there? What's so powerful, and what drove you guys to taking open space even into the title?
Actually, I want to start a little bit earlier. So we had those values, and then next thing was actually first of all, we thought those values are not new. Self-organization, transparency, customer focus, continuous learning. It's not that we invented something big here, right? So it was a translation, and that's all. And so we looked at who is supporting those values, and we found a lot of different streams doing that. Some very specific implementation, which is also a very interesting kind of story. For example, the in quotes Spotify model. Again, it's another thing we can discuss. Then several philosophies like Theory U is supporting things like that. Then we have several of those things which also are now part of the stream, but or some not, like holacracy, for example. And then we found some stuff in the facilitation world, and starting with appreciative inquiry, for example. Also, yeah. And then we were looking at, especially now talking about, trying to answer your question, talking about the facilitation techniques. We were looking at really proven things. So we were looking if there are companies who really are run by that stream. And we found several companies who use open space as their strategy. And I mentioned W.L. Gore before. That they probably are not aware that these are really open space principles. I'm pretty sure they are not aware of that. But this is a company using those principles for really running that way. And there are other companies, Valve, for example, as well, the computer gaming company. They also build up on these principles. But we haven't found any company who is built up on or is run by lean coffee. They use it somehow, but not as a strategy. And that's the reason why we picked open space, because we wanted to look at stuff that's proven, that we know it's working.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And it's also like it scales very nice to a large organization, right? As well, as a technique there to and self-organization. I mean, there's many things you learn about Agile by just participating here. Even if nobody talks about Agile and you just go through an open space as the first time you ever see this, you're learning a lot about self-organization as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Who should be reading the book? If you had to put like an audience out there, obviously everybody, and everybody should buy the book, right?
Exactly. Everybody. Yeah,
but
true.
who would you really say, like, all right, if there is a target audience out there, I would love to have this particular role within all of the organizations around the world. Everybody should have a copy. Who would that be?
So this is also an interesting question, and it is the first time actually I consciously thought about this while writing, or before, while writing actually more so. And we even created personas. Very proud of that we did that. And the interesting thing was that we kind of thought we really write for the execs, C-suite. And it is still kind of true, but in the end, when we look at our personas, they didn't end up there, because we felt that actually the people we write that kind of book for is more coaches, consultants, both externals and internals. So basically more influencers, kind of change agents in the company. And of course, you could also say somebody in the C-suite or execs are change agents, but it's not always the case, and it's not often their primary task.
Yeah.
And so it's really more, influencers.
How about middle management?
Yeah, well, the good thing with those probes is you can start anywhere. And that's why it is helpful really anywhere. And actually also one of our personas is middle manager. Yeah.
Very, very good. And Jutta, at the end of our conversation here, you have so much experience. We talked a lot about Bossa Nova, the book, which is out there, but I also wanted to just get a little bit of your opinion outside of the book. The book was published in February. A lot of things happened since then. You have a lot of experience. You have a lot of insights through your work at the Agile Alliance, as well as your coaching world you are in. Where do you think this whole company-wide agility, let's call it business agility as well, let's call it Agile as a just general speaking, where's our journey going based on your experience? Where do you see common trends right now? Where do you think, maybe it's the beginning of 2019. How's 2019 going to look like?
Wait, I have just to fetch my crystal ball.
Yes, please do so.
Actually, I can't really find it. So, hard question.
Do you see any
Probably I
trends?
can more say what I hope for. And on the one hand, I see it also. Well, I still see that Agile is something that's positive. I know there are some people who, meanwhile, say it's not so positive anymore because there are more and more people who struggle with that. But I still see that it has a positive connotation, and companies try to be agile one way or other. And I also think that this is, even if it gets a different name at one point, that it's the only way to really deal with those disruptions going on and thriving those disruptions yourself as a company to really sustain in the business. I really believe with those kinds of values, that's the only answer to that world we live in right now.
I mean, there's a lot of teams out there. The reason I'm asking is there's a lot of teams out there that experimenting with, or not experimenting, doing Agile on an IT team, building mobile apps or building web-based solutions or whatever, And but there's this business agility, there's company-wide agility, and that is we're a little bit on the forefront on things here. And there's maybe pockets of certain things, but do you see that expanding in the near future, or do you still think like there's this more, we're still in the very, very early stages, like let's say 2002, compared to the Agile Manifesto, like where people are like trying to understand what that means?
Well, at least I think I'm not so early as I was with my very first book. So just to be clear about that. So I published my first book, which was on scaling Agile, in 2004, and that was way too early. And I don't have the impression that this is the case now with Bossa Nova.
I agree.
Kind of the one thing. The other thing is I believe it gets more and more important because of digitalization, because every company is more or less a software company. And because of that, also stuff like Agile is maybe rolling over companies just because of that. Because software gets into the center, it becomes a focal point for almost every company.
Yeah, software runs many companies out there, even though if their main thing is not software products itself, but it's like how it's being run. So the impact is obviously clear there. But it's interesting that you say that about the positive attitude towards agility. I always, when I hear like, naysayers or etc. about this topic, it's like, what's the alternative, right? I don't think there is any, and if you put another name or a stamp on it and you say let's call it something else, I think it's gonna, at least today with today's knowledge, looks pretty similar to what we now know as Agile, especially in a complex world.
That's true.
Yeah, I want to thank you, and I'm looking forward to May when we have a chance to meet again in person at Agile Munich, where you're gonna speak. I'm excited about that. And we're going to do, and this is the second time we're doing this, we're doing an open space there as well.
That's cool.
That is cool, right? And thank you for the conversation. I know this was a little bit on the book on Bossa Nova, but I think there was a lot of things you can take away from the topics and take an entry into that book or the topics sideways any point or probe a little bit. Thank you so much, Jutta. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Agile.FM, the radio for the Agile community. I'm your host, Joe Krebs. If you're interested in more programming and additional podcasts, please go to www.agile.fm. Talk to you soon.